Record. So, Jeff, today, this is our monthly training. This is for May. Jeff Miller is the chair of Brazos County. He has been for a little bit. He's a multi-candidate member. He joined the 30% club last cycle, I believe, where he got more than 30% of the vote in his race, which is amazing. Um, Brazos County is also really well known for uh, bringing in a lot of candidates. They have a lot of candidates every year. So I have asked him to join us today and be the and kind of give us some of his insight on how he finds the candidates and that kind of stuff. And then to follow up with this next month, so y'all know, I'll be having one of our candidates who ran a couple of different races who's going to come on. He's not a county chair, but he's going to come on and he's going to give us the what as a candidate, what does he need from the county party? What does he need the help with? Where can y'all fill in and stuff like that? So that way, once you take Jeff's training here, you find yourself some candidates, you'll know what the next steps are to help that candidate once they get there. So without fail, here is Jeff.
Thank you, Jacob Bradley. I'm sorry, the voice of LP Texas. All right, so thanks everybody for showing up. I was uh, worried there were only gonna be like three people, so I'm happy that we have more. Um, and I'm hoping that this will be more of a discussion rather than just a lecture from me, because I am definitely not claiming to be an expert by any stretch. Um, and there's a couple of people that I was really hoping would be here that aren't yet, so I'll be disappointed if we don't have them here, but I'll wing it if we don't. Um, because the first thing I want to do is go back in time a little bit. Don't worry, I'm not going to tell you my whole life story, but just in terms of my involvement with the Libertarian Party, the very first election that I could vote in, that I was old enough to vote in, was 1994. And I voted for the Libertarian candidate for governor that year, despite having no idea what a Libertarian was. I just knew that I had seen the commercials and the hype for Ann Richards and George W. Bush and decided I didn't want to vote for either one of them. And so, since there was another choice on the ballot, I said, I'm voting for that person. I didn't even know if it was a man or a woman. It turns out that he's a man, but his name was Kerry Ellers, and Kerry could be either one. So, I didn't even know who I was voting for. But there's a lesson in there about a couple of things. One, my by now nobody should be questioning my libertarian credentials because I voted libertarian by my very first opportunity to do so. But second, that name on the ballot gave me and however many other people voted for Kerry that year another choice, and that is at a real basic level what we're here for. Because so since he made me a host, I'm getting these messages about admitting people, so
Oh, sorry
take
about
care of
that.
that real quick. Okay. Um, anyway, as a just citizen who paid attention and voted each time, one thing that I noticed as I came to vote is that there were unopposed candidates on the ballot. And I remember thinking, well, that's kind of lousy, like, because even if you think that candidate is like the greatest ever, I still have that part of me instinctively that's like there should be a choice. Of course, in the Libertarian Party, we always have none of the above as a choice. There's actually a bill that would make that the case in Texas on the ballots. It's hasn't gone through yet, but anyway, I looked at it as there always should be at least a choice, even if the other one is not somebody who's well funded that's going to have a lot of publicity and really have a chance to win. It's still just a fundamental principle that I believe in. And the other thing was, I thought, hey, if nobody else is going to run, maybe I should. You know, I just sort of had that in the back of my head of maybe I'll run for office someday, kind of thing. So fast forward to 2020, and that was the year I had just decided that I was finally done with any kind of support for either the Democrat or Republican parties, and I was like, well, if I look at my own principles, who do I really line up with? And I said, well, the Libertarian Party has always been the one that I agree with the most of the platform. So why don't I just go and show up for their thing and see how that goes. Because I had done the conventions for both Democrat and Republicans in the past. I said, well, all I can do is show up and see how it goes. And as it turns out, by the end of that first week, I was vice chair of the Brazos County Libertarian Party, which is another thing about me is I have a bad habit of volunteering for things, as many of you do here. Um, so in that first meeting, of the first person who spoke to me was Clyde Garland, and so that's why I invited him to be here, and he's not yet. I hope that he will show up, but Clyde's around 80, not necessarily the best with technology. If you think I'm bad with technology, then but he has been on Zoom before, so I know he knows how to on a basic level anyway. But I wanted Clyde here because he always has a lot of things to say about what he thinks we should do when it comes to candidates. And he has been a candidate almost every cycle since back in the 90s. So this is a guy that's a veteran when it comes to that. And he was, including at least one cycle, was one of those statewide candidates that got us ballot access back in the 90s. So um, he's kind of our trusted elder, or ornery old man that we love in Brazos. And so in 2020, one of the things that happened is late in the year, was the actual election of 2020. So we got into 2021, and it was time to find candidates for the 2022 cycle. And Clyde stood up at the meeting, as he often does, and he said, I'm looking for people that are willing to do nothing. And I raised my hand and said, I can do that. So he put me down on the list of potential candidates because uh, Clyde said, well, ideally, what will happen is the county, and of course, the state, when they're talking about statewide candidates, will be the ones that campaign for the candidates in terms of, and this kind of is in line with if any of those of you who went to the candidate training in Austin with Jeff Lyons and sorry, I forgot the name of his organization, but Libertarian Policy Institute, maybe. Anyway, um, kind of in line with that, there is that idea of ideally the candidate themselves um, has to do as little as possible because their team is who does the work. And Clyde, welcome. I was talking about you in your absence, but I'm glad that you're here. Um, so that it goes back to the ideal thing, which is that you have a setup in place where the candidate themselves, basically just has to show up, make appearances, um, and I would start to say even respond to surveys and things, but even that you can have somebody else do. So, um, like Jeff Lyons said, the candidate can be the one who's the prom queen. I still love that he said that because ever since then I've been telling people I want to be the prom queen. So um, unfortunately, I have these other things that I've had to do, so I haven't had to do that because I haven't had that team in place where I don't have to do all those things. But anyway, on a real basic level, to the answer to the question, how did Brazos County get as many candidates as we did, was that we asked everybody. It sounds simple, but and I'm not going to call anybody out by name here, but I had at least one county chair tell me something like, well, I asked at one meeting if anybody wanted to be a candidate, and like one person raised their hand, and then he didn't come back, and blah blah. Like that was basically their effort to find candidates, which I know people are busy and have lots of other things to do, but if you really want to have candidates in your county, you have to be a little more persistent than that. You can't just ask once and then let it go. You have to be a little more aggressive. So I asked pretty much everybody that I know, which, including people that I maybe wasn't really hoping would say yes, or I knew wouldn't say yes. But the whole point was, I'm not going to let this go by without saying I tried everything I could to get people to agree to it. So I asked coworkers, friends, people I play tennis with, and definitely, of course, the people who showed up to our county meetings. Every meeting, I basically started doing this sort of uh, mention this and then get a little bit more, talk a little bit more about the next meeting, and then talk about, I kind of stepped it up as each meeting went. And then eventually we did a um, candidate recruiting meeting in October of 2023, where Wes Benedict came, David Robertson, and Mike Tremont. And it worked fairly well because Wes has a lot of experience with recruiting candidates. David was one of those candidates and was a statewide Texas candidate. And he was working for Mike Tremont's presidential campaign. So it was like they each could sort of pass it off to the next person to talk about the different levels of candidates in campaigning. Um, and we had around 18 or so people that came to that, which is, larger than our usual county meeting turnout. And we were able to get at least a couple of people that hadn't been to a meeting period at that point that expressed interest in being candidates. And eventually we got a candidate for every non-attorney race on the ballot, except for the one that the county didn't actually tell anybody about. Because we had one race where the incumbent stepped down and sort of passed it off to the deputy, and then they didn't actually put that on the website as being something that was up, even though it was as an unexpired term.
Hey Jeff,
What's up?
this is John. I have a quick question.
Sure.
I have a question pertinent to something you said, and I'm not sure if you would prefer if we wait till the end or ask in the middle of your presentation question. So,
Yeah, that's okay. I'm hoping, like I said, this will be more of a discussion than a lecture, so I'm happy to go to veer in any direction anybody wants. I do want to take advantage of the fact that Clyde is here to let him speak on some stuff, but go ahead with your question.
yeah, so you mentioned kind of generally that you asked anyone you saw, I think was your wording. Um, I have the belief, and I don't think I'm alone in this belief, that there are some candidates that the Libertarian Party has suffered rather than gained for. I don't believe every candidate is a good candidate inherently. And I think probably people's views on that will vary. Some from like we should have good out front candidates and everyone else can be a candidate to some believing some candidates are harmful. So my general question
disagree with that statement.
Sure, yes, I think there will be a wide variety of opinions on that statement. So my question is, in approaching everyone, how do you vet people, and do you believe some candidates are harmful?
Sure, good question. I would say that there's an opportunity, especially if you start early in the process, like we have in Brazos, where the initial thing is just, do you want to be a candidate? But you have an opportunity to, as you say, vet the candidate over a period of time. And one of the first things that we always do, that Clyde does at every meeting, anytime someone shows up to something, is he gives them the, world's smallest political quiz and gets an idea of where they stand right off the bat on how libertarian they are. Obviously, that quiz is not the be all and end all of everything, but it gives you at least an indication of the starting point of somebody. I'm happy to say that everybody we ran as a candidate last time scored libertarian on the quiz. They weren't all 100%. They were, in the libertarian quadrant. So and ultimately, again, asking everybody doesn't mean you're going to nominate everybody. So, when it comes to the idea of harmful candidates, I have an example of that too, because last time around we had a race where we had someone who had run in another county previously, who ran for state school board, that we ended up actually having a contested race for. So obviously, since the filing fees, the contested races have gone way down. There's only been a couple in the state. But in that case, we did have somebody who ran in all the parties at the same time, and then one candidate that was only running as a libertarian. Now, if you went just based on their scores on the quiz, then the guy who was running in all the parties technically was more libertarian. But the convention delegates made the decision to uphold my ruling as the chair of that convention, that that candidate who was running in every party was not eligible based on the state law that says that if you lose a primary, you can't win uh, an election. It can't be on the general election ballot of another party. So I certainly know that there could be a case where somebody, a candidate that you ask originally and who says yes, you end up not nominating for various reasons. At least one that we had that I signed up personally last time. Uh, None of the above won his convention because he didn't show up to the convention and he didn't send any kind of information that, asking people to nominate him without being there. So again, that's where you have that protection where if you decide for whatever reason from you just don't think the candidate's going to do anything all the way to you think they're actively going to be harmful in some way, you have that opportunity, even if you have an opportunity even leading up to the convention, but especially once you get to the convention, you have that opportunity to either vote for another candidate or vote for none of the above. So pretty sure that Clyde has something to say about that subject as well as the other things I said. So I'm going to turn it over to him for a bit if he's ready. And once again say that Clyde has been a longtime candidate and as well as our candidate coordinator in Brazos County in finding new candidates. He also has gotten over 30% in a local race for county judge. So I want to have him speak, but I wanted to say that I don't necessarily agree with Clyde on everything. We're not always, 100%. For instance, he has said that, we only need a few candidates on the ballot on a statewide level to get ballot access, and everybody else can run and not pay the filing fee and not be on the ballot. I'm not entirely in agreement with him on that, but still, Clyde, do you want to talk on that for a bit?
Yes, you're correct. We have several layers of determining if a candidate is acceptable to us or not. And to make the statement that we may get a bad candidate means that our whole system is flawed, which of course it is, but it's not flawed to the point of inactivity, because there's several layers. First of all, the rare people who like Jeff, who ask people to run, he's already made a decision. He's going to ask them. So something about that person allowed him to ask him. So he's already made a decision factor. Yes, I think he's worthy enough for me to ask him to run for. Now, the biggest problem is people like Jeff do not exist. People hate asking other people to do stuff, and asking a person to run for office is really asking them to do a lot. If they do nothing but give us their name, that's a tremendous sacrifice they're making. They don't know how much risk they're taking to do that. Of course, we've done a lot of stuff to lower the risk of running for office. So okay, so now we select someone. Somebody like myself, I always give them the quiz. So if they don't score, I add the two scores together. And if I get 120 or above, they're good enough for me. And everybody has their own limit. Some people require us to be 100% libertarian. That person does not exist, almost does not exist. Jeff is one of them. I'm one of them. Maybe you're one of them because you're a past chair to the state party. So having that 100 requirement is ridiculous. Even having a 77 requirement is ridiculous. But I have my cutoff point. The person is not at least 120. Then I just don't ask them. If you don't ask them and help them fill out the paperwork, it's very likely they won't even get to that first stage. But if they do score libertarian and you do everything for them, then they may eventually end up at our convention and then our delegates. And of course, we're trying to put into place in Brazos County that all our maybe candidates and especially our convention candidates have a website, have a web page rather, and they can post anything they want. And if the delegates want to do a little pre-research, just go to our website, look up their name, and see what they have to say or what somebody had to say about them, and say, hey, he's only a 60, 70, but that's good enough for me. I think I'll vote for him. And we try to keep it really simple for them, because that's really what it boils down to. For me, because I keep it real simple. I mean, and you get involved in, they're immigrationists or they're not immigrationists or they're anti-aliens or not. That gets ridiculous. Overall, if they're more libertarian than or not, they're good enough for me. So there's all kinds of checks and balances. It's up to us to put them in place. And if nobody's willing to do it, nobody's willing to do it. You always have the problem of we want other people to do stuff, but that person does not exist. So for the person who exists, it just doesn't get done. That's the way it is. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I had muted myself.
Oh,
Thanks for that insight, and I agree with pretty much all of that. And Randy in the chat is saying an active candidate is better than a paper candidate. A paper candidate is better than no candidate, and no candidate is better than a bad candidate. And I would pretty much agree with that. And I think before you get to that stage where you're worrying about bad candidates, you have to try and get the candidate, period. And that's kind of
Right.
the thing is that
Right. You're right,
your
Jeff. It's
effort
tricky.
is in, yeah, the effort's in the recruiting. Uh, you have to start somewhere. And if you, ideally, we'd get to a point again where we would have contested races and people would actually have a choice even within the LP. Lately, that's been a pipe dream. We're just trying to get anybody, even for one race in a particular county. But the best is when you have actual contested races and people can hear from both the candidates or multiple candidates and make a decision on who does best represent the party. And even on that one I mentioned earlier about the state school board one, there's still a part of me that wonders if we hadn't done that and we gone ahead and nominated Mr. Caldwell for that spot, what would have happened? Because it would have been interesting to see, as Clyde pointed out at that convention, what would have been the reaction by the other parties, whether there would have been a lawsuit over that or other legal actions. Because I noticed when we were doing our hearing this time around for HB 4309, the filing fee fix bill, there was another bill that was being introduced that was specifically to clarify that thing about people running in different parties. And I noticed that was on there. And I think Caldwell may have achieved part of what he was trying to do, which was to set a precedent in the area because they paid attention to that. So the thing is, we know this time around, this is something I was going to get into separately, but I went ahead and answered the question about that initial stage of finding candidates. But the filing fee part, I'm definitely going to get into, but I'm going to go ahead and say since Susan has her hand up, I'll let Susan ask her question, especially if it's related to what we've already been talking about.
Yeah, it's an ancillary question to John Wolford's, which is, so we're in Blanco County. Currently, we really only have 4 people active in the party, although we're trying to grow it. I'm the rep for SD 25, so I know that Comal County also has trouble getting attendance to their meetings and things like that. So, but I definitely want to broaden the amount of candidates that run in SD 25. That's kind of like a personal goal of mine. But so what do y'all think about, because you said you talk to everyone that you know, and I think that's a good strategy. But what about putting something out on like neighborhood or a posting where you're inviting people you don't know and saying, hey, if you are libertarian leaning or into these issues, are you interested in being a candidate, and starting a conversation that way? Is that anything anyone has tried, or what do you think about that approach? And is that a way to get maybe bad candidates? So
it's great that you mentioned that. Clyde, do you want to talk anything about what you've been doing? Go ahead.
I'm very interested in anything that's free, and so like Nextdoor is free. So I spend a lot of time on that, unfortunately. But actually, everything we do pretty much doesn't work. But any free effort, so you can't do anything wrong. Any effort is better than no effort. I mean, because if the result is 0, it's going to definitely be 0 if you do nothing. So if you do something, something may happen. But usually, even no matter what you do, is 0. So anyway, with Nextdoor, anytime anybody says anything that has anything to do with government, I give my pitch as well. We don't need more government. We need blah, blah, blah. Hey, will you run for office, And of course, I've done that probably about, I'm going to guess 20 times so far. And of course, no results, no response. But every time I get to put a pitch in, I add the word libertarian. So you move it up to 40. So anyway, it's just getting the word out there any way you can that the Libertarian Party exists, and yes, we want candidates, and I don't worry about and I don't even worry about saying you sound well. I say that a lot. Hey, you sound like a libertarian. How about running for office? Things like that. Yeah. So any effort at any time, and I'm desperately looking for any suggestions. The cheapest way I have found to advertise is like in the Eagle in their help section. This was 2 years ago. I don't know what it is now because it's always changing. That was a really cheap way to do it. Of course, you got no results, but the point is, I could put an ad in very cheaply and pitch the Libertarian Party and candidates and stuff like that. So yeah, just throw ideas at me. Hey, the radio is a good idea. Okay, if it's going national, we need $10,000 for a national ad, and maybe $1,000 for a local ad. Of course, we don't have $1,000, and that's really what it boils down to. Is the next stage is to try to buy ads or get free ads like Facebook or well, of course, not Facebook, but Nextdoor. There are all kinds of things like that I don't know about, but I'd like to know about them. And I'd like people to make suggestions, even if they're ridiculous. We need $10,000. Okay, yes, that's a great idea, but we don't have $10,000. But that'll allow me to think about other ways of trying to get the word out there. And I think you said that you had only 4 people show up, and that's very discouraging to you. To me, the meetings are not important. It's very important to people like Jeff because it inspires people like Jeff and yourself. Hey, people are showing up. Therefore, we're really booming here, and let's do stuff. But the meetings are, to me, not important. What is important is your list that you contact constantly. And we have created that list, and the list has been vetted. The list is only and we have 150, I'll say 140 to be more exact, because a few people have moved away, etc. So I'll call it 140 list. 140 list is, I consider the party, and it's really the party. The county party is 4 people, Jeff and 3 officers. So they call all the shots. However, it's really nice to have a backup of 140 people who can advise us. Hey, we're going to do this. What do you think? And of course, nobody answers. But if we get one answer, that's great. They can give us ideas and stuff. But to me, our party is 140, not 4, or not the 10 people who show up at our meetings. It's 140 people that we can constantly contact. And most importantly is that they're equal to us, equal to the officers. They can post anything like we're doing here on Zoom right now, and just make any suggestions they want. And of course, if the officers don't agree, that's the end of it. But they always agree. They never shut anybody down. If anybody makes a suggestion and someone's willing to do it, they say go for it. And so that's one reason why we're a little more successful than other parties.
Yeah, Clyde sounds like he's been active for a long time, and I appreciate that, Clyde. I just want to comment that Susan's in a tough spot, being in a small rural county. Just getting anybody to show up is tricky enough as it is in a larger place, in the suburbs even. But Susan's in a tough spot there in Blanco County. She's been doing great work there, and I've been impressed. So,
okay. Susan, how many people do you have on your contact list?
I mean, it's something that actually has just been going on for the past 3 or 4 months. I've been collecting as many names as possible. I currently only have about 15 people,
Okay.
but I'm looking to increase that, as much as I can over the next couple of months.
Well, of course, the first thing Texas did in theory, was to send you a list of everybody who ever contacted them from your county. And that list should have been about 50 or so.
From my county, in terms of who are registered libertarians, or different?
All they did was contact Texas and says, hey, what do you it doesn't, they don't care. I don't know what their filing system is. Basically, I assume anybody who contacts Texas and they get their email, they put them on their list, on their contact list, says, hey, this person from your county showed an interest in the Libertarian Party.
Yes, and I have received some names from that, but it's not a lot. I mean, not a lot in Blanco.
Okay.
It might be more in Comal or
okay. Can you guess how many names it was they sent you?
I don't remember. It was actually, at the time I asked for that, and this was, I need to ask again. It was only 5 names, I believe.
Oh, 5. Okay, I'm really wrong in my guess. I missed it by. Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't a ton.
You have a hard roll to toe, and of course I make a little bit of effort to help the counties adjacent to us. I kind of make them fold them into our system to treat them just like our own candidates. And we have a county north of us. Cindy used to be the chair of it, and of course it got very discouraging. She's the only one who go to the meetings, but she ran for office once, and she goes. But anyway, so yeah.
Well,
So
my goal is to, and Randy's here on there, because he's Comal chair, is to treat ST25 like as a whole and just try to get candidates looking at that as a whole and working with the chairs to do that. So that's what I hope to start here in the next, gearing up for the summer. So,
well, you sure have a long list for that for the whole section of Texas. And I'm sure Texas would be glad to send it to you. It'll overwhelm you, but you'll have to figure out some way to get it down to a number you're willing to handle.
no, and I will contact them about the other counties. So that's a good idea. So thank you.
Yeah, and one thing I would say, it's all the more important in a rural county to do the same things that these county affiliate trainings have talked about when it comes to like events and other things, is trying to make sure your presence at whatever is going on in your county, like whatever, um, whether it's county fair or whatever kind of event or other thing is already going on, to be a presence at as many things as possible and look for the opportunity. Like Clyde said, just ask people, oh, you sound like a libertarian. Do you want to be a candidate? And even if it's not, if you don't have to have a huge, long, in-depth conversation, but just taking those opportunities to make your presence known and tell them this is what you're looking for. Because again, it's that principle of, if you don't ask, no one's going to say yes. And so recently, that list of 140 that Clyde was talking about, we got a message about another organization that is formed that has around that same number of people, or possibly more, that's called No East Loop, that is gathered around opposing a proposed highway that's would come off of Highway 6 around the Bryan College Station area. Anyway, once we found out, that group had a meeting at the same time, or basically the same place and close to the same time as our scheduled monthly meeting. We kind of piggybacked off them using the room and took that advantage to get in touch with people that otherwise we wouldn't have seen at our actual meeting. So I was able to do a few things at that meeting. One of them was get 36 people to sign the petitions that Kevin Hale made for trying to get a hearing for the filing fee bill that I was talking about earlier. And the other thing was, I was able to take a handout, LP Texas, both Brazos County cards that I made, business cards, as well as LP Texas cards, to the people themselves that were the guests at that meeting, because they had eminent domain lawyers. And, as soon as you got lawyers, I'm always thinking, well, that's one of those areas where we have a trouble finding enough candidates that are for those races. You have to be a lawyer. So I took that opportunity to give them those and say, we're looking for candidates. So again, there was another guy who got up at that same meeting, made a couple of, I would say, somewhat generic, the politicians don't speak for us type of speeches during this meeting. And before he said he had to go to work and he was leaving, and I ran down and gave him a card and said, we're always looking for candidates. I appreciated what you said, so get in touch with us. No, I haven't heard from him yet. I know that'll be the next question, but at least maybe there's a chance there. So it's taking all of those opportunities to plant the seeds. John's got his hand up again. Go ahead, John.
Sorry, yeah, I had some trouble with the mute button. Anyway, so we've talked a little bit about recruiting candidates and everything. And as a county who can also brag the 30% mark on one of our nominated candidates, what do you normally commit to people or not commit to people on party support when you approach a candidate or a potential candidate?
All right. So Clyde mentioned briefly earlier that what our strategy has been, again, and I sort of did too, is to say that as a county, we're willing to do all the campaigning basically for you in terms of we want a slate of candidates that we can present as these are the Libertarian Party candidates for this county. It doesn't mean everybody's a robot who has to agree on everything, but it means that we're campaigning as a county, as a party, and saying we're on the same page as far as this is what we're presenting as your opportunity. And so in that mold, um, we're providing anyone who is a candidate a page on our website that basically, as Clyde said, they're allowed to put what they want to put on there. And if they don't want to put something on there, if they basically are like, do that for me also, then we have a template of information that we would put for them. And it goes all the way from, everything is written for them on a page, all the way up to the people who want to have their own separate website. And if that's the case, then we would have a link. We'd have our list of candidates, and then we have a link to that site. We've done the last two cycles where those that had their own websites, including myself as a candidate, we had their picture and name and what they're running for, but then we had, what if you clicked on it, it sent you to the separate website. But as far as what the county does would provide that page. And then again, if that candidate has invitations to events or surveys or other things like that that they're invited to participate in, obviously we'd like for that candidate to be a part of that. But if they are not available for some reason or just not willing to do that, then we would have somebody who showed up as a representative of that candidate because it would be about the county party itself and be representing for that. So Clyde has offered before to even write up people's survey responses or to show up and make a speech on behalf of that candidate if they're not able to go to an event, things like that. We've also done the last time around we were in the process of doing brochures that our candidates will be on. Of course, again, with the filing fee problem, what we had was a lot of our candidates that got knocked off the ballot. So as it ends, what we ended up doing was on the site, we separated the candidates who were going to be on the ballot from those that were, but we didn't eliminate the ones that were off the ballot. We made it a separate section and highlighted the fact that they were banned from the ballot, basically like you were denied the opportunity to vote for this person, because we wanted it still to be clear that these candidates were duly nominated by our convention. It was the state that said you're not allowed to vote for them because they're not on the ballot. Um, so every time we're hoping to do more in that area, but again, it's about what people are willing to do. And that's the hope is that we have enough people and that we are in the position to do as much as we can for them. We had our candidate that got over 30% this time, Mike Sutherland, running for county commissioner. He basically, he was somebody who'd been elected to Bryan City Council multiple times. So he had his own campaign strategy for what he wanted to do. And so he basically was like, I'm not going to ask for y'all to do that. You have, focus on the other people and I'll run my campaign. And that was fine. We don't have a problem with somebody doing that if that's what they want to do. Again, we'll link their website and provide whatever they want us to, but we're not going to do something they don't want us to do. I think Jack is next. Can you unmute yourself, Jack?
There you go. Finally.
All right.
Getting that little screen to come up that says I can unmute myself is difficult sometimes. So what I wanted to say, and I don't know if this fits with what you're talking about or not, but just for any of those who maybe are in the same situation that I'm in with a very little activity from people who are libertarians here. I met a whole bunch of people this last week at the trade show who said, "Yeah, I'm a libertarian, but when it comes to being active in the party per se, that's not something they're interested in doing, and for whatever reason." But to get to the point is that I did get quite a bit of assistance from LP Texas, from Jacob and Nathan, the last time I ran. in terms of, giving me some assistance with how to do certain things, especially with getting websites and those kind of things established, and how to get other things done, even though I had to do some of those, take care of some of that effort myself. Wasn't that much, especially with their help. And so if that fits, it fits. If it doesn't, I apologize for butting in when it wasn't fitting.
No, that's good. And I think the idea of like the fundraising and stuff like that is obviously a different topic that we'll talk about on other trainings I have before and will again, I'm sure. Um, I know generally we've gone about an hour with these, so want to, before we get to the end, there's one thing I definitely do want to talk about, but I want to ask, um, Clyde, your ideas about the filing fees. Do you want to talk about those, and then
Yes.
I can say where I agree and where I disagree?
Okay. Well, you're up front and middle on filing fees because you came up with your $3,000 for filing fee. But half of it was your money and half of it was from others. And of course, you had no money left to advertise. Now, what we're also doing with our advertising for our candidates is kind of revolutionary, and it's what all parties should be doing. It's ridiculous for a candidate to advertise themselves when they're because of course the big parties spending a few million dollars is nothing. $1 billion, even for this presidential candidate, $1 billion is nothing either. But for us to even spend $1,000 for advertising is amazing. But what's more likely to happen? Well, of course, I know the history of it. Basically, we get candidates to come on the board, and basically they do nothing, which is fine because their name is very important. But we do have a few. I do have maybe 10% will actually spend a little money, go to events and stuff like that. But whatever little each one's willing to do, you can combine it all together, and the party does it for them. So in theory, if the average candidate was willing to contribute, say $500, which is not true, but to use that number, and we have 20 candidates, 500 times 20 is a pretty big number, which allows us to advertise for all candidates. And all our ads are for is, hey, Libertarian Party represents this. Go to our website and meet the candidate and review any candidate that interests you. And basically, that's really what all candidates do in their advertising. No matter how much advertising they spend, their goal is to get the viewer to go look at their website. In our case, our goal is to get them to look at our candidate page, which is almost the same thing. And we can do it 10 times, and so therefore, in theory, whatever one candidate can do, we can do 10 times as much. And so we have expanded our efficiency by a factor of 10. It's still spending from almost zero to 10 times zero is still nothing, but still it's 10 times more. It's heading in the right direction. So I can't emphasize enough how revolutionary that deal is. I think I lost connection.
No, we can still hear you. At least I can.
Okay. Yeah. So that's one thing. Okay, and of course you experienced that yourself. You spent all your money to pay the ticket. You had no money left or anything else, and you're still hoping you're hoping to somehow that other people would pay the rest, but it didn't happen. So you became very poor.
Yep. So for those who don't know, basically what happened last time after the Secretary of State knocked our candidates off the ballot, and I was one of those that I ran for state representative again, just like I had done in 2022. As Jacob mentioned, I got 32% of the vote in that race in 2022 against a Republican incumbent. In 2024, I filed to run again, and then, of course, the Secretary of State said, you didn't pay the filing fee, so you're off the ballot. Well, one of the other people they did that to was Bill Kelsey, our congressional candidate in District 10. So I actually filed to be the replacement candidate. And I first tried to get a petition signed because that's the alternate route that the government says, oh, well, you don't have to pay the fee. We gave you this ability to get petitions signed. But of course, what they don't tell you is that they have this archaic stuff with the petitions where you have to get them filled out on paper and pen. You can't even do an online petition. There was a lawsuit that supposedly changed that, but then that was stayed by a judge, so it's not settled yet. But again, I tried to get the petition and was not able to conclude that process. And I figured that was it. I thought that, well, I tried, it's not going to work. I didn't expect as many people as did to tell me that they were willing to pay some of the filing fee if I decided to go ahead and do it. So because, like Clyde said, it was around half of what the filing fee was $3,125. Because I had that many people pledge, I decided to go ahead and do it. But everybody here I know is aware that the filing fee bill that Kevin Hale spearheaded, that was recently voted on in the Texas House, did fail, which for this cycle, I know that would lead to the automatic question as well. All this stuff about asking everybody is great, but what about the filing fees? Because if you ask somebody, oh, do you want to be a candidate? And then you tell them, oh yeah, by the way, it's going to cost, $1,200 something for you to just to get on the ballot or to be considered. Because technically it's, you'll be considered at the convention if you pay this fee. The convention could vote against you, and then you've just paid the fee for nothing. Which, I won't go into all that because everybody here already knows how ridiculous that is. But the bill, of course, would just have returned the money to the parties, which makes sense. That failed. So the question then says, well, for this cycle, are we just saying, well, we're going to ride it out and try to get it done next time around? Or do you still want to ask candidates to file the paperwork and run as candidates if they're not willing to pay the fee, and still have them run a campaign when they're not going to be on the ballot? Now, my concern with that is that I think having as many candidates on the ballot as possible is a good thing, because it really shows people that we are a serious party and makes people look and say, wait a minute, what's this other choice on here? Like I was saying earlier, that kind of bring it full circle. That's one area where Clyde and I have a disagreement, because he says, well, they can run as candidates anyway and do everything else they would normally do. They just won't be on the ballot. The problem with that is I don't want to misrepresent to people, this is a candidate, vote for our candidates, and then they show up to vote and they're not on the ballot. To me, that could leave a bad taste in people's mouths where they say, well, the libertarians aren't even on here. They lied to me, that kind of attitude. And then once that happens, people may never give us the time of day again. So that's my concern when it comes to that. Now, in the recruiting part, I would still try to ask as many people as possible. But when we actually got down to the filling out the paperwork and that part of the process, that's the point at which we have to decide as the county, if someone wants to run, but they don't have the money to pay the filing fee or aren't willing to, are we willing to basically pay that for them, to give them the money to do that in order for us to have that candidate on the ballot? And that's a decision that obviously everybody's going to have to make as their counties, or how much they're willing to do that, and how many counties or how many candidates in the county. With counties that haven't had any candidates, it might be worth it to do that for one candidate. Take that lowest filing fee and say, well, we're going to do that one. I think the lowest one is $300, and say, well, okay, well, we're willing to pool together and get $300 so we can have this one candidate for sure. That may be worth it. The county may decide as a county, as an executive committee, that that's something they want to do. But I can't tell everybody the best practice on that. I just know that in itself, the filing fee bill failing and us being in the same situation we were 2 years ago, to me, does not change the process of recruiting candidates, and that we're still asking as many people as possible. It's just once we get to the stage of, is this person really is committed to running, then we have that extra hurdle to worry about. And we got multiple hands up, so I'm gonna I think Randy was next.
Yeah. I think it's worth acknowledging that it's okay to have different standards for different offices people are running for. If I've got somebody who's going to be a paper candidate for a county commissioner seat or a House district, and I'm not wild about them as a candidate, but they're not going to embarrass me, then I'm probably fine with that. And they're not going to be an active campaigner. They're just going to be on the ballot, willing to pay the filing fee, and that's it. Like, that's fine. That's acceptable. If they're going to be a more active candidate, posting on social media, responding to surveys and whatnot, then my standards are a little bit higher. I want to make sure that they're going to articulate libertarianism well and represent my party well. But even then, it's still just a local race and not a lot of exposure to it. Somebody's running for governor for United States Senate for a statewide position. My standards are a lot higher, and I'm going to apply those standards, and we all are, at our convention and whatnot. And so it's worth acknowledging that somebody who is just going to be on the ballot and isn't going to put much in it, okay, we'll let a few things go. But if you're running for a higher office, expectations are going to be a lot higher.
Yeah, and I think that's a good standard. And I would just say one thing before I go to John. I actually talked to one of our candidates from last time who was taken off the ballot, our state rep, District 12 candidate, Robert Profili. And he actually said that if he had it to do over again, he would have paid the filing fee because he had started telling a lot of people he was running. He'd gotten fired up, in his own words. And for me, like, overall, I think it was probably a good thing that he didn't, not only just because he was part of the class, and say legally, of people that were damaged by the filing fee bill situation. So he has that standing as well to say, that I was denied and the people were denied the right to vote for me. But secondly, when that happened, he got a lot of people who said, hey, what happened? You weren't on the ballot. And he got an opportunity to explain to them what happened. And he had people start asking him, all right, see you, Randy. Thank you. He had a lot of people asking him about running for other local things this time around, and including like school board and stuff like that. So he actually might have generated more interest by what happened, which is what I said at the time could be. And I always was upfront and honest with people from the beginning. I said at the time when we were signing people up in November, December of 23, I said, there's a chance that if you don't pay the filing fee, you won't be on the ballot. I told everybody that. Because we didn't know what was going to happen. As it turned out, that was the first cycle where we, in fact, were not. But this time around, he has told those people trying to get him to run for other races, well, I may think I'd run for state rep again, and this time pay the filing fee. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that that case has happened too. So there's a lot of interesting fallout from some of that. But John?
Yeah, so I have two things. At one point I actually lowered my hand and raised it again because I was so passionate about something that was said. The first one is a statement about the thing that was said about candidates who don't make it. We have been engaged in lawsuits